Well, hey, everyone, and welcome to episode number 46 of the Other Six Podcast. My name is Chad Boak, and I am your host. Joining me once again in the studio, my co-host, our worship pastor, and the man fired from the calendar factory for taking a day off, Mr. Matt Collins. Matt, how are you today, sir?
That one was really funny.
I'm glad you like
I like that one.
Okay.
Took a day off.
Not a month, just a day.
Yeah, just a day.
Give me a week away. I can come up with one that's halfway decent.
That was good.
Yeah. Anyway, Matt, good to see you, man.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah,
I'm
good. And also joining us, once again, our lead pastor, Adam Bishop. Adam, how are you, sir?
I didn't even know they had factories that did nothing but make calendars.
Apparently.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's very
researched
enlightening.
this.
Yeah, Matt used to work at one. He took a day off, and they were like,
mini
nope.
golden doodle section.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the corgi section.
There you go.
We have mini golden doodle calendars in our home.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because we have, proud owners of a mini golden doodle.
That's right.
So I think we did this for Christmas. All of the boys got their own mini golden doodle calendar. It's proudly displayed in their room. And so I see these calendars, every time I go in their room. So
Of course.
I didn't know they came from a factory. So
Yeah,
who knew?
The calendar factory, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, of which Matt is no longer employed
Better
at.
than a
so-
puppy factory.
Oh,
I read a really sad article last
boy,
week. They
the
shut down.
energy in the
That's
room
like a,
just went
like,
down.
yeah.
That's a real thing. They
Debbie Downer
shut
over
down
here.
this puppy factory
Oh, my
in
goodness.
Virginia. These people, they it's really sad.
Yeah.
I'm an animal rights advocate here, Chad.
Yeah.
So public display, we're gonna have Sarah McLachlan sing any minute now. It's gonna be amazing.
Arms of an Angel.
Yeah,
Arms of an
absolutely.
Angel commercial.
So,
Yeah.
Anyway, that popped into my head as well, but it's nothing to do with anything.
No, but that's
I
very sad.
appreciate
That's very
the
sad.
calendar factory
We went
reference.
there
Yeah.
from calendars.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, we got the puppies.
Three of our brains
We
together.
went
That's right.
that
Who
way
knows
from
where we'll end up.
calendars.
That's right. You
How are
never
your
know where it's
dogs,
gonna
by the
go.
way?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you know the dogs won the national championship this year? So
Oh,
that's neither here
yeah.
nor there.
Of
So I
course.
just had to work
Yeah,
that
Of
in.
course.
So yeah.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
Well, I missed getting to see you guys last
We
week.
missed you.
Yeah.
We may go a long time today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I had a blast at camp with the students. Really,
We wanna
really
hear
fun
all
time.
about it.
So, yeah, up at Covenant College, and it was put on
Covenant
by
College.
YM360, which I'm assuming stands for Youth Ministry 360. And
We couldn't think of the name last
Yeah,
week.
man, dang it.
Generate is the name of the camp. It's called
Generate.
And
That's
so
confusing, though.
That's so student ministry, though. You come
Yeah.
up with a lot of names
Yeah.
that nobody knows
absolutely.
what they
Which
mean.
one is it?
whatever. I had a name tag that said
Impact,
Generate, so that's all.
generate,
Yeah.
Generate.
But the
YM360.
band was
Evolve.
fantastic. Yeah, there you go.
Ignite.
Yeah, ignite. All right, my
Well,
bad.
we're writing curriculum here. For
Yeah,
some
we
reason.
are.
Yeah,
right.
playing
You're
around.
welcome,
So
Peter.
you were generating. all
Yeah,
week.
yeah. So had a great time up there. The band was fantastic. Speaker was fantastic. Food was there. And no, it was great. We had a good
What's
time.
there?
Yeah, Covenant College. So the cool thing about Covenant College, it's on top of Lookout Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were there over the 4th of July. And what was really cool was we took the students after worship on the night of the 4th of July, and we went to this lookout. And the city of Chattanooga's laid out.
Kind of makes sense. Since you're on Lookout
Lookout
Mountain.
Yeah,
There
you can
you
look
go.
out.
Well done. But you could see laid out underneath you the city, and there were fireworks just popping up everywhere.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so it was just all over the city. These fireworks.
You were
going.
so high up that you saw them like,
Yeah, they were underneath us. It was really neat.
oh, you were looking down on
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Have you
yeah.
ever driven through
absolutely.
Chattanooga?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like mountains all around
Yeah.
you,
Right.
and you were on top
And
of
we
it.
were on top of it.
He was
That's right.
watching them
Yeah.
explode.
So that was neat. Now that was great. Obviously, God did an amazing thing. Saw there were about 500 of us there total
That's
from all
great.
these other churches and everything. Had a
That's
great
cool.
time. Bunch of kids got saved. Bunch of kids got serious about Jesus. So it was
So I have to ask. So our church knows right now we're in the middle of a search for our next student pastor.
That's right.
You're at a camp.
right.
Did you get up like at some point during rec with like a bullhorn and make an announcement?
Yeah.
We're looking to hire. I'm just
Yeah,
curious.
so-
Did you do something for the organization while
Sure.
you were there, or were you just having fun the whole time?
Yeah, so I texted Hardy. I said, I'm playing Moneyball and scouting talent.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
not a problem. So each night there
That's
was.
not a game you play in Vegas, by the way. That's
No.
a reference to
That's right.
a philosophy of hiring.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a movie, too.
It's a movie. It's
That's
a book.
right.
All right,
Yeah,
so go
scouting.
ahead. Yes.
No. So each night the youth ministers would all get together for the youth minister meeting before we went and had the worship
Okay.
service. And so they said, hey, the first night they're like, hey, tell us, where you're from, your church, all that kind
You
of
were
stuff.
that guy, weren't you?
And so I stood up first, and I was like, "Hey, I'm not a youth pastor. I'm an XP. But is anyone disgruntled? No. No, I just told him. I said, "Hey, we've got a great opportunity."
So you did.
So-
Oh,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
proud of
Wow.
you. Good
Yeah,
job.
no, I
Well
was-
done.
So were you Jonah Hill or were you Brad Pitt in this scenario?
Brad
I'm
Pitt.
always Brad Pitt.
Come
Come
on.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm just asking because Jonah Hill was the one that came up with the algorithm.
He did.
Right,
He
this is
did.
true.
But you realize it wasn't really Jonah Hill, right?
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Right. No, but had some good conversations.
Both great actors.
Yeah.
We could do a whole podcast on
those
comparing
guys,
and
man.
contrasting the strengths of Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt.
Well, we should do that.
That's
we'll have
neither
to
here nor
save
there.
that for the.
We should do that, definitely.
We'll have
you-
to save that for the Hillcast.
So you,
That's right.
you made some connections.
Yeah, got a few names, been talking to
job.
some folks. So, but it was good. It was a great camp. Students had a blast. It was really a lot of fun.
So there's a movie/musical available on Netflix called A Week Away.
Oh gosh, here we
So
go.
I showed
know
it
this?
to our students last year.
My daughter does.
And
okay.
your daughter, we're still praying for her that she'll get right with the Lord and like this because it's really well done.
Yeah.
And it shows everything you're describing, like what it's like for students to go to camp and
Right.
have an encounter with God and make friendships. And it's done in musical form. And I kind of think most of life would be better if it just was a musical.
Sure, absolutely.
Like if we were all just singing
So
at all
we should just
times
sing
instead
through
of
the podcast.
fighting
We
with
can do
one
it.
another.
Yeah.
So it's a really good musical, and it has an amazing story. So if you've got kids, you're always looking for something that you can watch
Right.
with your kids that's appropriate.
Right.
A Week Away,
Yeah.
Netflix, you can thank me later.
Okay.
Especially if you listened to Christian music in the late 80s, early 90s.
Okay.
So there's a little Stephen Curtis Chapman,
Striper.
little Stephen Curtis Chapman, little Michael W. Smith.
Okay.
And Stephen Curtis Chapman makes a cameo in the movie as a lifeguard. And there's also some Amy Grant, and she makes a cameo in the
wow.
movie as the nurse at camp.
Okay.
So, which my nurse at camp never looked like Amy Grant, but that's neither here nor there.
Right,
So
right,
anyway,
right.
so there's a lot of fun things about like the movie, and it's a good story. And you're talking about camp, and my boys and Morgan, we've watched that movie a few times. A lot of good things we talk about.
Yeah.
And the kid that's in the movie that's like super talented that sings. He was actually at the thing we went back at the beginning of the year. What was it called? Winterfest.
Oh yeah.
He's now a Christian recording artist.
Oh, wow.
He was there like singing. He's super talented.
That's cool.
So it's not like it's something you just have to sit through and hear a lot of stuff that's not good. Like it's really good.
Yeah.
So anyway, a fun movie for a family.
Yeah.
It made me think of camp.
Yeah.
Y'all probably weren't singing the whole time, like in musical form. You
No.
were singing like in the worship services.
About half the time we were singing. No, yeah.
Chad was
yeah.
walking around singing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was good. We were playing dodgeball while doing musical dance numbers.
Okay,
and all
did
that
you
stuff.
play with the old school dodgeballs or
Dude,
the safe?
it was the ones when you got hit with it. It
You
left a
knew
little
it?
more. Oh yeah.
The
Yeah.
rubber one?
Dude.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's my kind of camp.
Let's go ahead and jump into what we're talking about today. So this past Sunday, we finished up our Implications message series after what, 12 weeks?
12 weeks.
Yeah, it was a great series going kind of all through the book of
12
Colossians.
weeks?
Yeah, I don't
Wow.
remember the last time we've done a 12-week series, but it was really good. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed kind of going verse by verse through this book. I thought it
It
was
did not
fun.
feel like 12 weeks.
No, not at all.
That's because you weren't teaching every week. So says the guy who sings.
Yeah, I was just singing
No,
every
I was
week,
kidding.
you know.
It was a good series.
Yeah.
And, you know, we do this, if you're new to Von Force, once a year.
Yeah.
We'll take 10 to 12 weeks. I think you're right. That's the longest we've done a series.
Yeah.
And we'll really dive deep into a book of the Bible, and then we'll kind of get back into 5 to 6 week series. But yeah, it was good. And, you know, anytime you go through a book of the Bible like we did, it gives you the opportunity to visit some passages you've probably heard before.
Right.
But then it also forces you to talk about some passages that you would prefer maybe just to skip over.
Oh, yeah, for
and
sure.
so that's why we do that.
Right.
Because
Right.
it forces us to talk about what God's word actually says. And
Yeah.
I think we covered a lot of different things in the series. And our hope is that it helps people in their walk with the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's dive into talking about, you know, this past Sunday. So I want to start with the title of your message. You said that ministry is a team sport. That was the title of our message this past week. And I think a lot of folks, when they think about like ministry, now obviously us as pastors, we all have our opinions and all that kind of stuff. But when the common person, probably the average person listening to this podcast, thinks about ministry, most of them probably think about you as the pastor up there preaching, Matt, you as the worship guy up there leading
worship
worship.
guy.
Yeah, that you guys kind of make all of it happen. So when you say ministry is a team sport, let's unpack that idea.
There's been a little bit of an overemphasis in the church with what happens from the stage.
Okay.
So, you know, we can unpack that historically, but we'd lose listeners. And so we won't do that. But I'm not opposed to what happens from the stage as being part of what happens in the life of a church.
Sure.
There's been a little bit of an overreaction to that in recent years, where some places have said, well, we don't need that to be a part of what we do at all. Well,
Right.
I don't think we need to go there.
Right.
But I do think there's probably been a little bit too heavy of a focus on that. End of the day, what Matt does and what I do are just as significant as what everybody else does in the life of our church. So the greeters, the folks who are serving coffee, the folks who are serving the next generation, those who are leading life groups, those who are passing out bulletins, those who are in production, I could go on and on and on. Those are all gifts that are being used equally by God in his economy to reach people for Jesus Christ.
Right.
So as the body serves with the gifts the body's been given, this is how it works. This is how the church works. And that's not limited just to what happens on Sundays. We have a number of our folks that are using their gifts throughout the week here locally. We've got some folks in our church who are in Mexico right now.
That's right.
Using their gifts to build houses and do construction and share the gospel. And so ministry really is a team sport because all of us, New Testament teaches, have been gifted with gifts from the Holy Spirit. So as we put those gifts into practice, we see ministry beginning to happen. And yes, Matt and I play a role in that, but our role is no more important than anyone else's role.
Sure.
We just happen to have the roles that more people see from week to week. But, Matt and I are fully aware of the fact that we're not doing what we're doing unless a bunch of other folks are also doing what they can do,
Right.
So it all works that way. And I think we have to be careful sometimes in overemphasizing certain gifts or overemphasizing certain roles. The truth of the matter is all of us serving together is what matters. And what we see in the conclusion of Paul's letter is that principle. If there was ever a guy that we could say, now there's a self-made man. There's a guy that didn't need anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a guy that when he sent out the newsletter every month updating everybody on his ministry, it was all about Paul, right?
Right.
No, you see Paul talking about these guys that are on his team, his inner circle. Even the guys that we look to as great men of God, great women of God who have been used, they always had a great team with them. I mean, read Billy Graham's biography. All he does is talk about the team of people that served to make everything happen. He was the guy that got up to preach when it was time for somebody to preach. But he's not getting up there to preach unless everybody on his team is using their gifts and working together as a team. And so ministry from the beginning and the church has always been set up for everyone. It's never just supposed to have been for those who are educated, those who are really gifted, those who are super elite. It's like, no, if you've come to faith in Jesus Christ, the promise of the Holy Spirit is you have gifts and you get to put those into practice as well. When you don't put those into the practice, the church suffers. The church is not being everything it could be. So yeah, ministry as a team sport is really the only way we see that presented in the New Testament, and healthy models of ministry really highlight that.
Yeah. Well, you kind of answered this a little bit, but you said behind the scene work matters. My question that you haven't answered is who comes to mind when you think of that, when you say that? Who are the heroes?
Well, in my personal journey, anybody who I really look up to who is not someone who's behind the scenes, someone who we would look at and go, he's a phenomenal teacher, or she's a phenomenal teacher, she's a phenomenal author.
Right.
He's leading this great ministry. The people in my life that are doing that for decades were doing behind the scenes stuff. So I'll think about, we're kicking off a new series this week called Find Your People. So I stole that title from Jenny Allen. So Jenny just wrote a book called Find Your People. The series is not based off of her book, but I really liked the title. And I started reading her book last week, and I'll just tell you right now, it's phenomenal.
Oh, that's good.
So everybody should pick up her book, and I'm going to talk a little bit about her book in the intro of the sermon this Sunday. I met Zach and Jenny Allen when I was 18 years old. And in college, they're married. They were the only married couple in our whole college. And so, they're married. And behind the scenes, I mean, serving for the Lord, serving at camps in the summer, serving on our campus, serving teenagers in the community, serve. Well, they weren't doing that because Jenny led some national, probably even now global ministry.
Right.
That's just who they were.
Yeah.
And so they were serving behind the scenes. And now you look at someone like them and you see how God's using them in these remarkable ways. And you think, well, she's got a spotlight. It's like, no. One of my favorite communicators is Louis Giglio.
Yeah.
So Louis actually preached at Saddleback this past weekend.
He did?
Yeah, I saw that.
So
Yeah.
Louis was out there preaching at Saddleback. So Louis Giglio, when he was a campus pastor at Baylor University years ago, just started doing a Bible study in his house. College students coming into his home. He starts teaching them God's word. It grows. It outgrows his house. It becomes a campus ministry that he begins to do. He then moves back to Atlanta where he grew up, kind of starts doing the same thing. It turns into 722 at North Point Church on Tuesday nights. He launches the Passion Movement, and all these years later, Louis is filling up Mercedes-Benz Stadium every single year, and he's preaching at places like Saddleback. Well, for decades, Louis is doing behind the scenes work. He's opening up his Bible and investing in college students in his living room.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that I have kind of let shape my life spiritually are people who never were looking for a spotlight. They were never looking for a platform. They were never seeking out popularity. They were simply using the gifts God had given them to invest in people, whether anyone ever noticed or not. And in God's supernatural way, he honored that and continued to open up greater opportunities for them.
Yeah.
Now, the challenge with that is I remember, this is about 15 years ago, I was having lunch with a guy, great guy, college student, felt called to ministry. And I said, that's awesome. I said, what do you see yourself doing in the ministry when you graduate college? What do you kind of want to start doing? He goes, have you ever heard of Louis Giglio? I'm going to be like, yeah, I have. And he literally said, I kind of see myself as a guy like him. And like I didn't know what to say,
Sure.
but like I wanted to be like, well, get ready to do grunt work for the next 20 years of your life, because that's what this is. My brother-in-law, who's a phenomenal pastor over in Georgia, he became my brother-in-law because we were friends for a few years, and he was so godly that I introduced him to my sister. Now that's about as high a compliment as you can pay someone.
No kidding.
So he just immediately his walk with the Lord challenged me. And so we've been friends for a long time. And I guess for the last 20, 21 years, we've also eaten Thanksgiving dinner together. So that's kind of how that goes. But, when we worked camps together when we were in college, man, we were working around the clock.
Yeah.
We weren't there going, someone can give us a microphone.
Yeah.
I said, no, we were there, but loved every second of it.
Yeah.
In fact, I look back on that season of my life with great fondness for the things that we were doing. And so I think sometimes, especially today with social media and with kind of the celebrity pastor thing that's kind of out there, I think there can be this notion that you have to be doing something really significant with tens of thousands of followers on social media in order for it to count. Man, I think there's going to be a lot of people real surprised when we get to heaven one day.
Yeah.
That some of the people in heaven that are getting the most crowns, none of us ever even knew their name.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to just get that out there and be really clear about that, because what we don't want to ever do is create the perception in our churches that unless you're gaining notoriety, what you're doing doesn't count. I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that. That is a new phenomenon. I mean, even 22 years ago when I started in ministry, that was not as prevalent as it is today.
Right.
It's so prevalent today that if someone feel like the Lord has given me something that I need to be faithful to and write it down, Henry Blackaby comes to mind. Who knows who Henry Blackaby is if not for Experiencing God? And if you've never read Experiencing God, order it on Amazon when this podcast is over and thank me later. It's fantastic. So Henry Blackaby in the 80s feels like he's being led towards this. He writes this book. It's been used by thousands of Christians to grow them closer to the Lord. Henry Blackaby never gets published today. So Christian publishers today, the first thing they want to see is what's your platform, how many followers you have on social media.
Yeah.
Right.
They're too lazy, yes, I said it, to do marketing for themselves. They need the authors to do the marketing. Well, what it's done is it's created this platform mindset when it comes to doing ministry.
Yeah.
And so those of us who are in the local church with people in our church, if we're not careful, I mean, you've got access to everybody you want to listen to online, and go listen to good preaching, listen to good worship. I think it's fantastic. But don't buy into the trap that unless you're doing something that's gaining notoriety, it doesn't count.
Right.
It doesn't
That's
matter.
right.
You never know the investment and the impact that you are making today when you simply invest in the people that the Lord has you around right now,
Right.
which is what we've talked about a lot in this series. We talked about it last week about witnessing and sharing our faith. So I know I kind of, got on a little soapbox there for a second, but I just think it's important to say that out loud. Behind the scenes work matters because that's a man-made phrase.
Right.
God doesn't look at it that way.
Right.
He doesn't see anything that he views as behind the scenes. That's our sinful pride imposing that upon things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So embrace all of the opportunities the Lord gives you and do them with great fervor, and then trust that the Lord will do with you whatever he wants to do. But don't look for notoriety. Does that make sense?
No, it absolutely
Yeah.
does. And it's really interesting that you bring up the camp thing because, when we were at the high school camp this past week, there were so many, college-age staffers, and bro, they were working nonstop.
Yeah.
And the day that we left, we had to check out by 9 o'clock. They had a new group coming in at 1, and they had to turn the camp over in that time. And it's what you're talking about. It's they're there, they're serving, they're loving on these kids. And man, I was so impressed with how they did it. So it's exactly what you're talking about.
And those college students, if they keep walking with the Lord, in 15 and 20 years, like they will be leading in prominent positions.
Yeah.
Because they're not looking for that right now.
That's right.
They're just serving whoever the Lord has put in front of them right now.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad that was the testimony that they left for the students. That's great.
It was really awesome. So I want to shift gears just a little bit real quick here. So we talked a little bit in one of your points yesterday. You talked about conflict. You said conflict is inevitable. And so, I want to talk about, with ministry being a team sport and conflict being inevitable, how do we have conflict that honors Jesus? How do we handle conflict biblically?
I think step one is be very wise when you're listening to someone else talk to you about another person. So that's step one. So you don't want to be a listening ear for gossip.
Right.
So one of the things I like to say to people that I have been challenged by people that I respect is if somebody says something to me about another person, I listen. I'm compassionate. I'm kind. But then I eventually say, have you said to that person what you just said to me? Exactly the way you just said it to me.
Right.
9 times out of 10, the answer is no. And I basically, at that point, then shift the conversation towards how can I help you get the courage to go tell that person what you just told me?
That's good.
Because biblically speaking, you need to sit down and discuss that issue with that individual.
Right.
Gossip is when you tell somebody else something that they can't do anything about. So, if I'm running my mouth about somebody to somebody else, they may think they're being friendly to sit there and nod and say, oh, poor you.
Yeah.
But they're actually aiding the gossip. So what we need are more believers who will listen with kindness, listen with compassion, and say, well, what if you worded it this way? What if you approached it this way? What if you didn't attack them? What if you sought to understand their perspective first? But the first step is don't be a listening ear to that kind of stuff.
Right.
That's how the enemy gets a foothold. But then the second step is if you've got something going on with somebody in your life, you just need to go sit down with that person and have that conversation. That's what God's word teaches us to do. Lovingly, biblically, without judgment. But sit down, and I think a really helpful phrase that I've had to learn over the years when having these kind of conversations, and you might want to grab a pen and jot this down somewhere, is when you do, and then draw a blank and put a comma, it makes me feel like draw a blank. You can't blame another person for how you're feeling. No one can make you feel something.
Right.
That is a big principle that all of us go, that's not true. No, it's true.
Yeah.
You got to own your emotions. We are not in kindergarten. We're not 2-year-olds. We're adults. I got to own my emotions. Chad, I cannot have an emotion and blame Chad. Well, Chad made me feel that way. Now, that's what 2-year-olds do, okay?
Right.
But what I can say is, Chad, when you threw that coffee mug at Matt, it made me feel scared, okay? So, now it's like, okay, we're going somewhere, which, by the way,
why are you whipping coffee?
That did not happen,
That's
right?
good coffee, dude.
So, point out somebody's action, own your emotion.
Right.
This works great in a marriage. Instead of blaming each other for how you feel, point out what that person did. It could be your spouse, it could be your child, it could be a coworker, it could be a friend. Now, if you're on the receiving end of that message, it's not something as severe as throwing a coffee mug.
Sure.
Someone says to me, Adam, when you made that expression, it made me feel like you think that you're smarter than everyone else. Do you think you're smarter than everyone else? No, I don't think I'm smarter than anyone else. I don't want you to feel like I think I'm smarter than anybody else. I need to work on that expression. You just gave me some good feedback. Most of us don't want to make people, we don't want to contribute to something that generated a particular negative emotion in another person, but a lot of times we're doing that and we don't know. There's a word for that, blind spots. If someone has the love for you to point that out, receive that with kindness and graciousness and go, thank you. I will work on that.
Right.
It's not the same thing, but I did have somebody one time years ago tell me, you walked through the lobby on a Sunday and it looked like you were upset. It looked like you were mad. What was going on? I said, I wasn't mad. I was like, there was something that was spilling on the other side of the campus, and I was trying to get there in a hurry to clean up the mess.
Right.
And they're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
They said, but just remember, when you're walking through the lobby, other people don't know that's what you're going to do.
Yeah.
So you might want to be more mindful. And I was like, that's really helpful feedback.
Yeah.
Right.
So if somebody points out something, it's be kind and say thank you. But if you've got a conflict going on with somebody else, if you don't address it, it will only get worse. It will only get worse. You'll start thinking bad things about that person.
Right.
You'll
Right.
sit around. You'll find that person will be taking up residence in your mind, and they're not even paying rent. But you're thinking. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it
yeah.
just festers and it grows. So if you got an issue with somebody, you need to go sit down and talk with that person.
Let's talk about the difference between unity and uniformity. Aren't we all supposed to be like cloning Jesus as best as we can? So help me understand that.
Yeah. We definitely want to become more like Jesus.
Right.
I think that in Christian circles, there can be a tendency to become more like certain Christians than more like Jesus. So you see someone who's really gifted in a particular area, or they have certain things about their spirituality that you're like, man, I really want to be that way, but
Like Chad.
that may not be, they may have a different gift mix than you.
Yeah.
We all have different strengths. We all grow in our faith in different ways. We have different personalities.
Yeah.
We have different life experiences. And so, you want to become more like Jesus, but the best way that you can become more like Jesus is following the path that's called your life. You don't have to become like someone else to grow in godliness. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you want to become more like Jesus, but let Jesus be your template, and then be wise enough along the way to build relationships with other Christians that can help you and challenge you. I mentioned my brother-in-law earlier. He really challenges me in my walk with the Lord and has for a long time. We have some similarities that our friendship is built upon, but we're also very different. So if I tried to become more like Jesus by becoming more like him, I'm just going to get frustrated. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you've got people in your life that you really look up to and you admire their walk with the Lord, that's fantastic. But just remember, you're still you. It's important for us to remember that as parents with our kids.
Absolutely.
You don't want to project godliness onto your kids as becoming just like you, doing the things you do, having the same gifts that you do, the same interests that you do.
Right. Yep.
So don't that's what I mean. And then obviously, not letting our differences divide us.
Okay.
Being able to have which our society has totally lost its mind when it comes to this. Two adults having a conversation where they don't see things the same way.
Right,
And it doesn't sever the relationship. No, I mean,
it's impossible.
You can see things differently, not sever the relationship,
Right.
continue to be friends,
Yeah.
continue to be Christ-like. It's a great testimony to our community. It's something I hope our church is known for in the community. Yeah, the people of On Forest, they really love one another and they really love me. That's what we're supposed to be known for. So don't get caught up in our differences. Stay focused on what unites us.
Yeah. So I really liked how you said this past Sunday that God wants to write a story through you. Be aware of that. So can you give me some examples either from your own life or folks that you've known where you've been walking through like a really tough time, but then, because of that story later on, you were able to look back on that and be grateful for that time?
No, I can't really answer that question that way.
Okay.
I can't think of anything difficult that I've ever gone through that I've looked back and I was grateful for.
Okay.
Everything difficult I've ever gone through that was truly difficult, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It was awful. I don't like anything about my life that was difficult and gut-wrenching and painful and hard. So I don't look back on those times with gratitude that I went through them. I've never had that thought at all. I've looked back on those times and gone, I can't believe that happened. How did that happen? What did I do to contribute to that? How could that person have hurt me that way? I've asked all those questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've said, I wish I never would have gone through that, but I've never said, I'm glad I went through that. What I do think happened, and I think this is the heart of your question, but I think it's important to make that distinction because hard times are called hard times for a reason. They're really terrible. And some of our listeners, you may have lost loved ones. You may have had a spouse walk out on you. You may have a child that's an adult who won't have anything to do with you, and you didn't contribute to that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a hard, and it's like, how am I supposed to frame that with gratitude? So I'll give you my take on what happens in those seasons. And I would encourage our listeners to make this a point of study because I've made this a point of study. I try to study and read biographies of people who went through really hard things in their walk with the Lord, and what did they glean from that? What can I glean from them, and what can I glean from my own life experiences? And so I remember, this is kind of my corollary, I remember when we found out that our second child was going to be a little boy. So I was kind of disappointed. We had Sam, and Sam would have been a little over a year old maybe when we found out we were expecting. And then we found out, it's going to be a little boy, which people who don't find out what they're going to have, like I have a lot of respect for them because, I'm just like, how do you plan?
Yeah,
and then I remember like for centuries, this is what people did,
Right,
so
right.
my parents were like, yeah, that's what all of us did. I'm like,
That's why every nursery
now,
was yellow.
Yeah, we can find out now. Why would you not want to find out? But
Right.
that's just me projecting my personality, doing exactly what I told everybody not to do in the last conversation.
Right.
So we're going to have another little boy. I wasn't disappointed that we were going to have a little boy. I was fearful that I wasn't going to be able to love him as much. It was easy for me to think if we have a little girl, well, now I got a little boy and I got a little girl, and I will love her just as much as I love him because of the difference.
Mm-hmm.
It was hard for me to understand. I already got one of those. Like, how am I going to love another little boy
Right.
the same way? And it was a point of conversation between me and the Lord for the rest of that pregnancy.
Wow.
Because I never wanted to let that be the case.
Yeah.
I
Right.
certainly didn't want anybody to know that. I'm sharing this now all these years later on a podcast, so I guess everybody knows it now. But the moment he was born, it was the only way I know how to explain it, because I've given this a whole lot of thought over the years, it was like there was this part of my heart that there was a door. And when Jacob was born, it was like God took a key and he unlocked that part of my heart. And now all of a sudden, that part of my heart, which had never been accessed before, was fully available for Jacob. It didn't remove any of my love for Sam.
Right.
It unlocked a part of my heart I didn't even know was there, a greater capacity to love I didn't know I was capable of when that little guy entered the world. So when we found out baby number 3 was a boy, I didn't have that fear at all. I just knew there's going to be another door that gets opened. And of course that happened. And any parent who's ever had children understands exactly what I'm saying. That when you have a child that's born, it doesn't take away love from the other children. It expands your capacity to love.
Yeah.
That's right.
So the reason why I share that example is I think there's a correlation there between what happens with us when we go through difficult things that we're not grateful for. But when you go through a difficult thing, if you go to God, if you lean into God, if you don't push God away, if you actually draw near to him, is what Scripture says, what happens is you see there's a greater capacity for God to love you than you ever knew about. There's a greater capacity for God to walk with you through difficulty that you never knew. There's a greater capacity for God to identify with your pain that you didn't know that was there. There's a greater capacity for you to experience a new level of relationship with God that you didn't know was there.
Sure.
Now, what's amazing about that is when you get on the other side of that difficulty, that remains. That's what you're grateful for.
Gotcha.
You're grateful for the greater capacity that was developed in that season between you and the Lord, because that's never gonna go away. It's gonna stay with you now moving forward. The next time you go through a difficult thing, it's another opportunity. It's another opportunity to build an even greater capacity of love and relationship. And this is what it looks like when you actually have a thriving relationship with God. In many ways, God will move you from one difficulty to the next for a greater purpose. A lot of times we miss out on that because when we go through difficulty, we push God away. We don't draw near to God. We blame God. We seek for that depth of love and understanding from somewhere else. Maybe it's a substance. Maybe it's an unhealthy relationship. But God is able to grow a capacity of depth with you that you're far not even aware of, just as I was unaware of the love that could exist for another little boy until it happened. And so I think sometimes when we look back on those things, what we're grateful for is that. We're grateful for who God was for us in that season and the side of God we got to experience that we hadn't experienced before that. But the circumstances that got us there, we're certainly not grateful for those.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think if you can see life's challenges and problems that way, it doesn't mean that they are good. We've got people in our church right now who are walking through really difficult things. And for me to act like there's a blessing in that is a little, it's just, I don't know what it is, but it's certainly not caring.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, what you're walking through is terrible. But the God who you are walking with is so much bigger than that. And if you will lean into that, he will be faithful to grow that relationship with you. And eventually, you're going to get out of this circumstance, right? And when you do, you're going to still have that. And so I would just encourage you, if you're walking through something right now, know that God's with you and he is available to do that for you. If you want to use that metaphor, like unlock a door in your heart to expand the capacity of your relationship in ways you didn't even know was possible before.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that's why it's so important that when you're walking through those difficult times, what you're talking about, you have to have your people.
Yeah,
it's so important to have the church around you, your people around you.
Just to remind you of the stuff we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Life
right. That's
groups
exactly right. Keep you encouraged, keep you going.
Yep.
So, shifting gears a little bit here, let me ask you this. You said that the church has both a large and small dynamic to me. Can you help me unpack this idea?
Yeah, the church launched large.
Okay.
People, I love a church where I know everybody's name. Well, you wouldn't have enjoyed Pentecost.
Right.
So, 3,000 people got saved the first day. They didn't even fill out connection cards. I don't know how they followed up with them,
Right.
It's crazy. They didn't even have an app back then, Chad. So, the church launched
wait,
large.
what?
I know. It's
No
unreal. They launched large. They kept adding thousands and thousands of people. The intent of the church has never been to be small. If there's one message I could get out to the church at large, it would be that. The gospel message is for everyone.
Right.
The moment we start acting like it's supposed to be small, here's what we've said. We're good. The rest of y'all can go to hell. That makes you uncomfortable? My bad. But that's the truth of what we're saying. The church is never supposed to be small. Jesus died on the cross for the sins of the world. God wants more people to come to faith in Jesus Christ than we could ever fathom or imagine. He is being patient with us, we've talked about,
Right.
so more can come to faith in Jesus Christ. A church that says we don't want to grow larger is a church that's telling its community, we really don't care if you go to hell. That's exactly what a church is saying. Every church should have a banner in their lobby that says, yes, we want to get larger, to weed out all of the Christians on the front end who somehow think that they're supposed to keep it small.
Right.
That was for free, all right? So once we get that behind us, we recognize, but the only way we can actually do all of the one another passages in the New Testament is if we actually know people. So if it's thousands of people, we can't be obedient to large portions of the New Testament. So we've got to organize it in a small way. So the church has to constantly be getting larger and smaller at the same time. We didn't create that template. It's all over the New Testament.
Right.
As they're adding thousands of people, they're also recruiting. Who's got a home that they can meet in this week, right? We know what that's like.
Yeah.
And they're meeting in homes. They're sharing meals. They're caring for one another. They literally contributed all of their financial resources together to make sure everybody's needs got met. Now, we don't make that a requirement to lead a life group here.
Right.
Because we'd have no life group leaders.
Right.
But all joking aside, we, as well as many other healthy-minded churches in our community, want to do the same. We want to get larger so more people can meet Jesus while simultaneously getting smaller by organizing people into smaller groups. 10, 15, 20 people. You can push it a little larger sometimes, but after about 20, 25, it's kind of hard to keep up with everybody's names, okay?
Right.
So we structure everything around here that way, from our production team to our worship team to our volunteer teams in the kids ministry to the student ministry to the cafe to the parking lot to the guest services to all of our teams, as well as life groups. Our ministries are structured that way as well, whether it's student ministry or children's ministry. There will be a large component, teaching, a smaller component, relationships. So everything about our church is structured that way. But the reason why I wanted to point that out in the message is so everybody knows that wasn't developed in like a retreat where all the leaders got away and they came back with a bunch of, where you do the flip chart and you write great ideas.
Yeah.
No, it's from the New Testament.
Okay.
So you got to do both. You've got to be in relationship with a smaller group of people while also growing larger as you reach new people.
Yeah. So you said the validity of the Bible can be trusted. But are we just saying that because the Bible says that we can trust it, or is there an outside source that's kind of confirming that?
There are outside sources from the 2nd and 3rd century. I think the bigger principle that I would just want to, get people to see is the same criteria that is used to teach history in any school.
Right.
American history, global history, European history, whatever continent we want to go to, okay? if you use that same criteria for the validity of sources that are used to teach our children factual things from history, the New Testament far outweighs any of those sources that are available in volume alone.
Right.
So if you're going to question the validity of the New Testament, you've got to question the validity of the Roman Empire, Alexander the Great, everything you learned about growing up. So you can't pick and choose. Now, whether or not someone chooses to say that has authority in my life, that's a different discussion.
Right.
But I don't think we should tell people that the Bible should have authority in their life if we also tell them, no, you can trust it. It's valid. It wasn't just made up. Use the same criteria with every other thing that we use, and there's actually a greater volumes of evidence for the New Testament's validity than some of the other things that we just assume and accept as fact.
Right.
So that's the point I'm trying to make there.
Yeah. So you kind of wrapped up, you talked about the next generation. You talk about how the next generation's always been a priority. So, I got a chance to spend time with students. We put a lot of time, money, effort, resources into kids and students and next generations. We talk all the time, both from the stage, on this podcast, and conversations about how important the next generation is. So can you give me some examples? You said that the church has always been about the next generation. Can you give me some examples of that? And then kind of just remind us, why is that so important?
Yeah, I mean, the examples, I guess, from history matter. I don't know how relevant they are today, but I think they matter just to know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the guys in the first century were investing in the leaders of the second century.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of how we got into the second century, and then you can kind of study it from there. I'm a little bit more concerned about what that looks like today.
Okay.
So, student ministry. So most people don't realize student ministry has only been around for about 60, it's already 2022, 70 years, right? So I think W.A. Criswell's church was the first church to do student ministry. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But there was a meeting at some point where someone went, hey, what if we had a department of the church that just focused on, what's that new sociological term they're using these days? Teenagers? Okay. Let youths of America, right? Let's have a department of our church that just focuses on them.
Yeah.
And they went, all right, let's give it a shot. Let's try. There was a point in time where somebody went, these college students leave their home and they're living on a campus with a bunch of other college students. What if we tried to start doing ministry on the campuses across our nation? And someone went, I don't know, maybe we should give it a shot. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Right.
Yeah.
So everything that we see that serves the next generation at some point in the past wasn't happening. So here's where I'm going with all this. Let's be really careful that we just don't get stuck and become complacent in how we reach and disciple the next generation. One of the things we're committed to here at Vaughn Forest is always being open to new ways of reaching people, new methods. Our message is never going to change, but our methods have to change. So reaching teenagers today may look a little different than it did reaching teenagers 30 years ago.
Right.
Discipling teenagers today may look a little different than it did discipling teenagers 30 years ago. And here's the beautiful thing about the church. God has always given the church guidance through the people of the church. So some of you listening right now, you literally might be the person who goes, well, what if we tried this? And we all look at each other and go, why didn't we think of that?
Yeah,
well, the reason we didn't think about it is because the Lord gave you that idea.
Right.
The Lord gave you that vision. The Lord gave you that insight. It might be from your personal experience in church. It might be from your personal experience growing up. It might be from a number of different things. But we're going to always be committed to try whatever option we can come up with, as long as it doesn't violate the gospel message of Jesus Christ, right? When I worked in my church in New York, The Journey, which you guys know I'm still super close to all these guys up there. Our mission statement, and I've always really liked this. In fact, we might swipe it at some point, was to give the people of New York City the best opportunity to become followers of Jesus. And I've always loved that phrase, best opportunity. I like that. I want to give people the best opportunity to meet Jesus. When's the best opportunity for teenagers to meet Jesus in our community? Let's figure that out and let's try that. What's the best opportunity for kids to enjoy being at church on Sundays? Well, let's try that. What's the best opportunity for kids to feel comfortable inviting their friends to come with them to church? Let's try that. So that shapes a lot of what we're trying to do, is what can we do to help kids and teenagers, really take these steps? And then I think the other thing that really, just drives me is this isn't always the case, but if you study biographies of, people that the Lord has really used, I think, in 2,000 years of church history, one of the common themes you see is that their walk with the Lord really took root at a pretty young age, before the age of 18. That certainly, don't take that to the bank. You know what I'm trying to say. But, Billy Graham got saved at a crusade when he was a teenager, and we could go on and on. But, you just never know what God is going to do with a young person's life. And if you get to be a part of that at a very formidable age, that's a pretty rewarding thing.
Yeah.
So, our church is super committed to reaching the next generation, but we're also super committed to coming alongside parents and trying to help any way that we can.
That's right.
Parents need encouragement, guidance, resources. A lot of times parents need permission. Our society has told parents that there's certain things you can't do. And sometimes we have to tell parents, no, you can do that because you're the parent.
Right.
So one of the things we try to do as a church is also address that. So that's a big part of the next generation as well. It's, yes, the kids, but also the parents.
Yeah, that's right.
And so we're committed to that. By no means do we think we have it all figured out. We're trying to be students. We don't consider ourselves experts. But I think that at some point, that's kind of what the Lord's looking for.
Yeah.
Who's open, who's available. So many times in ministry, we can get to a place where we think we have it all figured out, and the Lord's trying to do a new thing, but we're so committed to the old paradigm that we're not open to experiencing the new thing the Lord wants to do.
Right.
And so we try to be open, because the Lord, taking, and especially in a post-COVID world, we talk about this a lot. Like, what is kids ministry and student ministry going to look like for the next decade?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, let's be on the cutting edge of that.
That's right.
Let's be leading the way. And I kind of think in some ways we are, but I'm not content in that. I certainly want us to continue. So if you're listening to this podcast and there's a stirring in you, pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Pay attention to that. The Lord may be actually leading you into being part of the solution towards shaping what kids ministry and student ministry really needs to look like moving into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good place for us to kind of wrap up this conversation on the message and the message series, which has been great. But in keeping with this idea, talking about next generation, we actually have our kids camp coming up a little bit later, this month, July 24th, 25th, and 26th. And so maybe someone listening to this, they're going maybe I'd like to kind of dip my toe in the water and check that out. Let's talk a little bit about Kids Camp. What all is going to be happening there, and how folks can kind of get involved with it.
Well, we found out this morning we already have more kids registered right now than attended last year.
That's right.
So it's going to be gigantic.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
So there's going to be a lot of kids up here, and I love what you said there. It's 3 consecutive evenings, and You just say, I'm in, I want to help, and we'll get you on the right team.
Yep.
We do things in teams.
That's right.
You won't have to know what to do or figure it all out. We'll have somebody there showing you what to do. There is a process. You got to do a background check. We don't just let anybody serve our kids.
That's right.
But if you want to be encouraged, be a part of this.
That's right.
If you want to be encouraged, be a part of this. If you want to see some kids and some students fired up about the Lord, be a part of this.
Yeah.
And then kids, as just like adults, are looking for relationships. They're looking for friendships. And so what will happen on the other side of that event is those kids are now going to have a friend at church.
That's right.
And if you're an adult that you're not serving actively in our kids ministry, we get that. There's a number of ways you can serve at our church. But it'd be fun to give up 3 of your evenings, and at least when you're walking through the lobby, be able to say hi to a bunch of those kids because you got to know them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So I think it's a really fun thing for our entire church. And then you know a little bit more about the details of the act, like what's going to happen each evening. I've kind of said, now I think I can say this out loud. I hope it doesn't diminish attendance, but I'm actually going to get to teach a lot with the kids.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm fired up about that.
You're teaching with the kids?
But I'm going to do like a big large group thing, like with the kids, and I've been working with Morgan on that, and like I'm really
Is there like
fired
a skit or something like that?
I hope so.
I want to see Adam in a costume.
I might swallow a live goldfish. Who knows? So I go back to my student ministry days.
What is going on
I don't
here?
think you could do that now. Sarah McLaughlin might call us.
That's right.
We'll strike that from the podcast. But anyway, so give us the rundown of the evening.
Yeah, so it's 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. each night. night. The first night, really the first and second night, there's going to be big group time like you're talking about. There's high energy music. They're moving. There's rec. There's crafts. We're going to feed them dinner. And it's going to be a really,
they
really
won't be
fun
bored,
time.
moving around, lots of different things.
Absolutely. And then that first night, while the kids are doing that, we've invited everyone new to Montgomery, new to Pike Road, new to Vaughn Forest, all the parents, to come to our parent experience, which is going to be, again, a great dinner. You're going to hear all about Vaughn Forest. You're going to hear about Montgomery, some great places to come, because we have a lot of new military folks moving in. But again, just if you're new to Vaughn Forest, we would love to have you there at that.
We have a lot of families that have moved to Pike Road this summer as well.
This is true, too. Yeah. Absolutely.
Last year at that dinner, I was surprised. It was a good split between military families and families that had just recently moved here.
That's right.
That weren't in the military. One of the things you did last year at that dinner was you had like a calendar of things that you could do in the area.
That's right.
Dude, we kept that calendar all year. It was awesome.
Yeah, we're going to have that again. Yeah,
Okay.
we're going to do that. We're going to have trivia. We're going to have some fun. I mean, it's going to be a great night. So then the second night, obviously the same thing again for the kids. Lots of fun, moving around, high energy, and the parents get a date night. We know that a lot of folks are moving to the area, and then just maybe you need a date night out in the town. So drop the kids off here, 5:30 to 7:30. Go have a blast. It's going to be really fun.
I like that.
And then night 3 is our big family party.
Okay.
And so we've got water inflatables. We've got food trucks. I mean, it's going to be a blast.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Nice.
and that again, that's 5:30 to 7:30. We're going to be hanging out, having a really good time.
So if you haven't registered your kid, how would you do that?
VaughnForest.com/kidscamp.
Okay.
And there's a couple of different options there. If you want to serve, if you want to register your kid, if you are new to the area, however you want to do it, you can do that. VaughnForest.com/kidscamp. And then I guess kind of to wrap it up, we're kicking off our brand new series this Sunday, Find Your People.
Yep.
And so what do we have to look forward to with that? I'm just talking about connections.
Well, it's timely because we're also starting life group signups
That's
for the
right.
fall.
Yep.
And I just think it's going to be good for everybody to hear how normal it is to actually want to have friendships in our life.
Yeah.
We still have a part of our culture like the self-made man, the self-made woman. I can do it myself. And yet all of us have a longing deep down inside for friendship, for relationship.
That's right.
Not where it gets weird and we all have to buy matching sweatshirts, but just,
Why
somebody who looks at me and goes, I get you. I understand you.
That's
Someone who we can have fun with and enjoy life. And God actually put that in us.
Yeah.
So if you feel that, like that's from the Lord, and we're going to talk about that in a really fun way.
Yeah.
It's not going to get weird, or any of those kind of things.
Sure.
But it's going to be fun to just talk about friendship, relationship, what that looks like in our church, what that looks like in the community, how that pertains to your kids, your teenagers. Going to be a super really fun series. I think it's going to encourage a lot of people.
Well, I'm excited for that. Well, I think that's a good place for us to kind of wrap it for today. So thank you for sharing with us again. It's been a great series and lots of great conversations. And so on behalf of Adam Bishop, Matt Collins, Sound Gal Joya, and myself, thank you so much for joining us today, and we will catch you next time.